Usually it's done with a handheld light source. That's kind of what separates light painting from just taking a photo, is you're holding the light and moving it around by hand. Usually you kind of paint light on the subject. You use kind of a longish exposure. I say longish, 2 to 3, 5, maybe up to 30 seconds, whatever you need for the situation at hand. And sometimes it's really useful to combine multiple frames so that you can light an image 2, 3, or 4 different ways and then combine them into one finished image. And that's real easy to do. I'll show you how to do that. So you can use it at night with relatively kind of medium range subjects, a little bit further away subjects at night, quite a bit further away. Here I'm shining a flashlight up this path towards the sunrise. That's in Death Valley, by the way. Even further away yet, there's a path about 200 feet long over here along this waterway. I just walked along there holding a light, and that created all this illumination in one pass. A hillside, that's not a mountain, that's a mound at the Badlands. So this is maybe, 30, 40 feet high. People think, I'd light up that mountain. That's not a mountain. These are mountains. This is at Capitol Reef, and the people we were with had a Jeep with floodlights on either side of the roof. So we just made arrangements for them to drive down the road and illuminate the mountains and hillsides on either side. And it took them about a minute to drive down that road, so we used a 1-minute exposure. Close-ups, cactus flower in my front yard. The little bud vase like we have here, even more close-up. You can include people, and you can also include the light source. Sometimes you can write words with it. You can just illuminate the subject. You can kind of let your imagination run wild. You can combine things outside with light painting and stars, and all sorts of things. And even star trails are kind of a type of light painting, and in fact, the Photoshop side of it is almost identical. So you can light paint with the stars if you're into more distant objects. If you're out light painting and you're wearing a headlamp, be careful where you walk, because you could wind up being the subject of your own image. And more seriously is think about etiquette. If you're out with other people and you're wanting to light paint, make sure you're not ruining someone else's photo when you're creating your masterpiece. So check to make sure other people are ready and everybody knows who's going to do what when, so that you don't inadvertently ruin someone else's picture. Process is really simple. Camera on a tripod like we have here, manual focus, or if you use back button focus, which I like real well, that separates the focusing from the shutter release. So typically you program a button on the back of the camera, instant back button focus, and when I push that button, it triggers autofocus, and then I can push the shutter release all I want, and it never refocuses. Somewhere ISO 100 f8, 3 seconds is kind of a go-to starting point for me. Basically, you open the shutter, you illuminate the subject, and close the shutter. And had I been taking a picture, we would have just light painted the picture. And it's really that simple. It sounds complicated and scary, but it's really very simple. If you think about it, if I hold the light here and push the shutter and take a picture, you would say, well, I'm not light painting. But if I open the shutter and then paint, I am light painting.
So it's all in that technique of
It's
pushing it around.
Yeah, it's all the wrist. If I do this, I'm light painting. If I do this, I'm just taking a picture. So, don't let it scare you. Light sources, that was a flashlight. I also have an LED wand that I like real well. You can use a strobe. And I was telling Bruce, I dug this out for tonight. This was my Amazon Basics flash that I got 3 or 4 years ago for $27. Actually, this replaced the first one I got because it didn't work. Amazon, that was a free replacement. Car lights, sometimes you do it purposely, sometimes inadvertently. Headlamp, same thing, sometimes on purpose, sometimes a happy accident. The moon, the stars, anything that gives off light. Sometimes even the object itself. If I wanted to light paint my computer, I might use the computer screen as a light source. Camera settings, manual exposure and focus, 2 to 10 seconds, aperture, ISO. For the most part, I kind of stick in this 2 to 3 second range because that tends to be a comfortable time frame for light painting. Sometimes 10 seconds, sometimes longer if I'm outside trying to light up something far away. But the brightness of the source and the distance to the object will make a huge difference. So you'll need to experiment a little bit. Aperture, usually you want to be in that f5.6 to f11 because that's kind of a sweet spot for sharpness with most lenses. And then the ISO, just depending on the brightness of the light, the distance from the subject, the length of the exposure. Usually, like today, I'll be at ISO 100. If I were outside in the moon, I'd be at ISO 800 maybe. If I was trying to combine it with the Milky Way, I would be at ISO 1600. So, most important thing, once you get past all of the technical stuff, is where to stand. If I stand here at the camera and I light paint, that's going to be basically like using the on-camera flash. Very flat, no shadows, no texture, very dull and boring. And for the people sitting back here, you can see it's very dull and boring. If I move the light up here, now we have highlights and shadows are what shows texture and form and shape. So we don't want the light here, we want it here, or here, or here, or somewhere other than where the camera is so that we can create shadows and texture, contrast. And that's true of any kind of lighting. So, we now come to the interactive portion where I try to make this work. And it may work, it may not work. It'll be interesting to find out. So, turn the camera on. Normally I would use a remote release, but the same plug on the camera for a remote release is also what I use for tethering. So I can't use a remote release, so I'm going to use a 2-second timer. And I can't use Lightroom to tether because it doesn't support so many cameras. So I'm using Capture One to do the live capture of the image. And then we may load it into Lightroom because that's going to be a more familiar place to be. So everything's turned on. Right now I'm set at 2.5 seconds, ISO 100 and f11. You can see those settings. I've got a 2-second exposure and I've got my flashlight. And you've usually got some choices with the flashlight. You can have a big spot like that or a tiny spot.
Where do you get that flashlight? Why does this one?
Amazon.
He loves Amazon.
I love that. This flashlight has a feature that most of them don't have, and that is it has, both bright and dim. But it also has this flashing mode, which hopefully nobody is prone to seizures. That's kind of my secret. I'll tell you all my secret. That flashing mode creates a little bit of kind of light, shadow, dappled light, and it creates some lighting effects that you really can't do any other way. So it can create a real interesting effect. So let's take a picture. And I'm going to blank the screen so it gets dark in here. We'll call that dark. And I'm going to turn on my blinking flashlight and just kind of hide it. So 1, 2. We just took a picture. And let's just take another picture. I'm going to press the shutter release. I have 2 seconds to come over here. we'll light that side. Let's do one kind of from behind. And let's do something really strange. Just do it right here. So let's see what we got. That's strange. That's more interesting. Looks like I need to focus. So, fortunately I have a flashlight, which makes it easy to focus. And we'll just do it again. So let me blank the screen. Let me just blank the screen. There we go. Okay, picture one. And picture two. And picture three. Oh, those look better.
Which one was the first one?
The very first one was this one.
No.
Out of
But-
focus.
Who's that?
The second
This
choice.
one was the first one with the light over to the right. You can see the shadows going to the left. And then we had one with the light behind it. And with the shadow over on this side. And
Like the first one.
just for comparison, let's do kind of a flat, ugly one.
Are you using an overexposure for the white?
I'm basically just using these settings because I was pretty sure they would work. So I don't have a highlight clipping warning set. That's a little on the dark side, but not nearly as interesting as when we have light coming from the side. So that was using a flashlight. A flashlight is a real small light source. If you think about, one versus the other, one of these is big, one of these is small. And the nice thing about a big light source is it creates much softer light. And when you're light painting, in fact, this is a nice long light source. Nice long light source. But if I move it, I'm creating an even larger light source because the light is that whole area that I'm moving the light through. So, does that make sense? So, let me blank the screen. And turn on the camera. I don't know if that's bright enough or not. Peek here. Yeah, about right. So let's do one on this other side. Sorry for being in your way. Myself. And let's do one across the top. And we can even get a little bit wild. So what I did there, I really painted up the back, which created some backlight, and this light's going to be in the picture. But then I went across the top to add some light to the top of the flowers. So we could have a nice combination of light, or it could be overexposed.
Yeah, but if you would have done it right, then it would look like a white background.
Yes.
It would have been centered.
So that was over the top, that was on the left-hand side, that was on the right-hand side. So you kind of get the idea. And you can even do the same thing with the flash. Flash on, and it's set at a pretty low power. Careful with it, I'm probably okay. I'll take this down a little bit more. Let's see how this works. I flashed it twice. Did I get both of them? Yep. So if you have a long exposure, if you're using the flash, you're not limited to just one flash. You can flash 2 or 3 or 4 times during the exposure. And the last thing I want to try to do is get a little bright, but you get the idea. So that's basically the idea. You can do it, we could do the whole room, you could do a mountainside, you could do a building, go around with it. You could photograph a whole building at night with this one strobe or one little flashlight by taking lots of different frames and illuminating lots of different pieces as you go. You can do people. The only caution with people, especially if you're using a flashlight or any kind of a longish exposure, people have a tendency to wiggle and move. So if you want to take a picture of a person, I would suggest having them at least sitting down, maybe sit on a chair where they can rest their hands on something, or something so they're really kind of locked in and not moving. Because otherwise, if they're standing, they're going to be wiggling. Any questions so far? Let's just real quick look at how we might want to combine these. Because as beautiful as one individual image is, it gets a lot more powerful when you start to combine images. So I've just loaded these into Lightroom, which is where you may be working from to start with. And let's just grab a couple. Let's say we like, let's see. Let's take this one, which was illuminated from the right, and this one, which was illuminated from the left. And it's a little bit on the bright side, so I'm going to do just a little bit of adjustment here to tone those highlights down. And I'm also going to open up the shadows a little bit. And we'll do something similar to this one, especially with the shadows. We'll brighten up the shadows a little bit. Don't have a pure black background. But since the camera was on a tripod and nothing moved in the middle, I can go back to my grid view. These two are both selected. If I right click on either one and choose Edit In, and down here at the bottom, Open as Layers in Photoshop. What that's going to do is launch Photoshop. It's going to bring both of these files in, and it's going to stack one on top of the other. So if you look in the Layer panel, you'll see that you have both files there, one on top of the other. And that will let us then combine them to get the best of both. And That probably sounds complicated. You're thinking, oh my gosh, masking and blending and all this kind of stuff. Real easy way to do it, and actually you do star trails and lots of things this same way. So we have 2 layers here in the layers panel. The one on top is the light from the right. The one on the bottom is the right from the left. So normally the one on top just hides the one below it. But we have these special tools called blending modes. And right now it's set to normal, which means this layer just kind of covers up the one below it. But what if there were an option to say, just take the brighter pixels from the top layer and the brighter pictures from the bottom layer and combine them that way? And in fact there is. That's called Lighten blending mode. And in Lighten blending mode, we get the light from the right and the light from the left all in one finished image. So you could have 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 different frames all stacked up. Just put them all in Lighten blending mode, and automatically you get all the light from all the pictures all at once. In fact, if we go back to Lightroom, this last picture where we did the strobe, fortunately nothing moved. So let's just go ahead and open this one also. Now this is going to open as a separate document, but that's okay. The pixels and the scale and everything are all at the same place. So I can tap V for the move tool, click on the picture, and drag up to this other one, drag down into the picture area, still holding the mouse key, hold down the Shift key to tell Photoshop I want it to put it in exactly the same spot it came from. Let go of everything, and now we have it pasted just right on top of the ones below. So there's below, there's this one. If we put this in, what do you think, Lighten blending mode? Now we have that glowing blue vase with the light from the left and the right. A picture that would be very difficult to light in just one frame. By light painting, you can bring it all out. So like I say, it works at any scale. We're doing it at tabletop. You could do it building, hillside, person, car. Cars are real good, especially with something like this, so that you get nice, big, soft reflections.
What is that called?
This is a light wand. The light wand itself, it's a Yongnu. Got it being you should probably get them on Amazon. It was about $50 or $60. You can adjust the brightness, and you can also put it in color mode. There we go. So you can change the color of it.
I noticed a slightly different color temperature when you first used it as opposed to the flashlight.
Could be. Yeah, the flashlight tends to be just a little on the green side. This is much more daylight balanced. So they are a little bit different. So, any questions?
Have you played with the programmable light lamps?
No, I have not.
I saw somebody doing things with that one night, and it's quite a trick. I mean, you'll just ran it across. I was taking the star photo and painted a campfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could do some pretty amazing things, but it's also, like I said, this was like $50 or $60.
Oh, this guy got into making them and assembling 2 or 3 of the string and all sorts of.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do some really neat things with it. You can, if you're using a flashlight, you don't want it to be too bright, but you can light paint words facing back at the camera. At my nephew's wedding, we did a picture of the wedding party, and there were 4 siblings, so they each had a little flashlight, and they spelled out the letters to love with a happy bride and groom. So be creative, have fun, try things. At worst, you're going to spoil a few electrons and bother some pixels temporarily.
In the summer, try using lightning as a lightning source.
Yes, that's a good point. Lightning is the same way, and in fact, lightning's real easy at night. You open the shutter, wait for a lightning flash, close the shutter, open it again, wait for lightning to flash, close the shutter, open it again. If you want 10 lightning bolts in one picture, that's what you do. Go to Photoshop, put it in Lighten blending mode.
Or aim away from the camera and you've got the biggest flash and so that would pan out.
Yeah. Okay,